The crystal vase shattered against the wall inches from my head, sending shards cascading across the marble floor of our mansion's grand foyer. My 18th birthday cake lay untouched on the dining room table behind me, its candles still smoking. "You ungrateful brat!" Diana, my stepmom of 6 years, screamed. "How dare you say you want to study art instead of business? After everything we've done for you." I stood my ground, though my hands were shaking. "Grandma always supported my art," she said. "Your grandmother is dead." Diana spat. "And thank God for that. She was the only one filling your head with these ridiculous dreams. This family runs Bolton Industries, not some pathetic art gallery." My father stood in the corner, swirling his whiskey, saying nothing. He hadn't said much of anything since marrying Diana, really. Not since Grandma Rose passed away 2 years ago. The father who used to sneak into my room to look at my drawings was gone, replaced by the silent shadow of a man. "Dad," I pleaded. "Please, you know this is what I've always wanted." He took another sip of whiskey, avoiding my eyes. Diana stepped closer, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor. "Your father agrees with me. You're 18 now, Emma. Time to grow up and join the real world. Either you accept your place in the company, or what?" Her perfectly painted lips curved into a cruel smile. "Or you can leave. Right now. Take your sketches and your childish dreams and get out of my house." "This isn't your house," I said quietly. "This was Grandma Rose's house." "Wrong." Diana laughed. "Your father inherited everything when that old witch died. And since I'm his wife, this is my house now. So what's it going to be, Emma? Business school or the streets?" I looked at my father one last time, searching for any sign of the man who used to defend me, who used to say I could be anything I wanted. He drained his glass and turned away. With trembling fingers, I pulled out the acceptance letter I'd received that morning from the Florence Academy of Art, my dream school. The one Grandma Rose had always said I should attend. I held it up, then slowly tore it in half. Diana's triumphant smile froze as I started walking toward the grand staircase. "Where do you think you're going?" "To pack my bag," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. "I choose the streets." "You're bluffing," Diana scoffed. "You've never worked a day in your life. You won't last a week out there." 20 minutes later, I stood at our mansion's ornate front doors with nothing but a backpack containing some clothes, my sketchbooks, and the small wooden box Grandma Rose had given me before she died, making me promise not to open it until I really needed it. "I guess you really are as stupid as your grandmother," Diana sneered, watching me from the doorway. "Don't come crawling back when reality hits." As the heavy doors slammed behind me, I heard my father's voice for the first time that evening. "Diana, maybe we should." "Shut up, Charles. I knew what I was doing when I married you. That brat was the last thing standing between us and everything your mother left. Good riddance." I walked down the long driveway, past the manicured gardens Grandma Rose had loved so much. At the gates, I turned back one last time to look at Bolton Manor, the only home I ever known. In my bag, the wooden box seemed to grow heavier. What I didn't know then was that Grandma Rose had left me far more than just a box of memories. And in exactly 2 years, Diana would learn just how much her perfect plan was about to backfire. The first 6 months were exactly as hard as Diana had predicted. I couch surfed between friends' homes until their parents started asking questions. I worked 3 jobs: barista in the morning, waitress during lunch, and night clerk at a small hotel. My hands were always shaking from exhaustion, making it hard to draw anymore. One rainy night, sitting in my tiny rented room above a laundromat, I finally opened Grandma Rose's box. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid, expecting to find old photos or maybe some of her jewelry. Instead, I found a letter and a small golden key. "My dearest Emma," the letter began in Grandma's elegant handwriting. "If you're reading this, then things have happened exactly as I feared they would. Diana never fooled me. I saw right through her the moment your father brought her home. A woman who measures life in dollar signs will never understand the value of a dream." I wiped away tears as I continued reading. "But I made preparations, my darling girl. The key enclosed opens safety deposit box number 247 at First Metropolitan Bank. Everything you need is there. And Emma, remember what I always told you. Sometimes life's greatest masterpieces take time to reveal themselves. All my love, Grandma Rose." The next morning, I walked into First Metropolitan Bank clutching the golden key. The bank manager's eyes widened when he saw it. "Ms. Bolton, we've been expecting you for quite some time." Inside the safety deposit box, I found another letter, this one from Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Callahan. Along with it were dozens of legal documents, property deeds, and stock certificates. My hands shook as I read Mr. Callahan's letter. Apparently, Grandma Rose had been far cleverer than anyone knew. While everyone thought she'd left everything to my father, she'd actually transferred most of her assets into a secret trust in my name years before her death. A trust that would mature on my 20th birthday. The mansion, the grounds, controlling shares in Bolton Industries, even her personal art collection worth millions. All of it would legally become mine in 18 months. "Your grandmother was quite explicit," Mr. Callahan explained when I met him later that day. "She saw how Diana was influencing your father and wanted to protect both you and the family legacy. The trust is ironclad." Does my father know about this? No one does. That was the point. Your grandmother wanted you to have time to find your own path without Diana's interference. Speaking of which, he pulled out another envelope. This was meant to be delivered today specifically. Inside was a paid tuition letter to the Florence Academy of Art, along with a living stipend and apartment arrangements in Italy, all handled through the trust. "Your grandmother believed in your dreams, Ms. Bolton," Mr. Callahan smiled. "She just wanted to make sure you had the chance to pursue them on your own terms." That night, I booked a flight to Florence. As my plane took off, I thought about Diana and my father, still living in what they thought was their mansion, still thinking they had won. They had no idea that in 18 months, everything would change. I spent the next year and a half in Florence, studying art, finding my voice, and growing stronger. I learned about business too. Grandma's trust manager taught me everything I needed to know about running Bolton Industries. I was no longer the scared teenager Diana had thrown out. Then, 1 week before my 20th birthday, I received an email from Mr. Callahan. "The papers are ready, Ms. Bolton. Shall we proceed with the eviction notice?" For the first time in 2 years, I smiled thinking about Diana's perfect marble foyer. "Yes," I replied, "it's time to go home." I stood in front of Bolton Manor on the morning of my 20th birthday, feeling like a completely different person than the scared girl who'd left 2 years ago. My hair was shorter now, my posture straighter. The charcoal on my fingers was from choice, not service work, and my clothes were chosen with careful purpose, a tailored black suit that screamed quiet power. Mr. Callahan stood beside me, briefcase in hand. "The eviction notice was delivered yesterday. They should be expecting someone. Though not you." Right on cue, the mansion's front door burst open. Diana stormed out, designer heels clicking furiously on the marble steps, waving a stack of papers. "This is ridiculous. Some trust can't just." She stopped dead when she saw me. All color drained from her face. "You." "Hello, Diana." My voice was calm, steady. "Like what I've done with my hair?" You're behind this?" She looked at the papers in her hand, then back at me. "This is impossible. Charles inherited everything." "Actually," Mr. Callahan stepped forward, "Mrs. Bolton only allowed you to believe that. The majority of the estate was placed in a trust for Ms. Emma years ago. A trust that matured today." "Charles?" Diana screamed toward the house. "Charles, get out here." My father appeared in the doorway, looking older than I remembered. When he saw me, he froze. "Emma?" "Hello, Dad." He stumbled down the steps, staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. You look so much like your grandmother." "Shut up about that old witch," Diana snapped. "Call our lawyers. She can't do this." Actually, I pulled out my own stack of papers. I can. The mansion, the grounds, controlling shares in Bolton Industries. Grandma Rose left them all to me, and my first act as majority shareholder was to audit the company books. I smiled coldly at Diana. Interesting reading, especially the part about personal expenses being charged to company accounts. The board was very interested in that report. Diana's face went from white to green. My father swayed on his feet. "You have until tomorrow to vacate the premises," Mr. Callahan stated professionally. "The company security team will arrive at 9 a.m. to escort you out and supervise the removal of your personal belongings." "Only your personal belongings," he emphasized, looking at Diana. The art collection stays. You can't do this, Diana whispered, but her voice had lost its steel. We're your family. Family? I laughed softly. Family doesn't throw a teenager out on the streets. Family doesn't watch silently while their child is abused. You taught me exactly what family isn't, Diana. Consider it the last lesson you'll ever give me. I turned to my father, who hadn't said a word. Dad, do you have anything to say? He looked at me, then at Diana, then back at me. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the father I used to know. But then he turned away, just like he had 2 years ago. That's what I thought. I nodded to Mr. Callahan. Make sure they only take what's truly theirs. And Diana? I called as I turned to leave. The crystal vase you threw at me. The one that almost hit my head. I expect to find that replaced. As I walked back to my car, Diana's angry screams echoed across the grounds. But they didn't frighten me anymore. I had one more stop to make. Grandma Rose's grave, where I planned to leave her favorite roses and show her my latest sketches. After all, she was the one who taught me that the greatest art often comes from pain, and the greatest revenge is lived well. 1 year later, I stood in the newly renovated east wing of Bolton Manor, now transformed into the Rose Bolton Art Gallery. The space was filled with light from the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dozens of paintings, some from Grandma's collection, others created by emerging artists I'd discovered during my time in Florence, and a few of my own pieces. The opening gala was in full swing. Board members mingled with art critics, while students from the new Bolton Arts Fellowship program, funded by the company's profits, showcased their work. Grandma Rose would have loved it all. Ms. Bolton, my assistant Sarah, appeared at my elbow. Your father is here. I turned to see him standing awkwardly by the entrance, looking older and smaller than I remembered, but sober. After the eviction, Diana had filed for divorce once she realized there was no money left to squeeze out of him. Last I heard, she was trying to sink her claws into another wealthy widower in Palm Beach. Let him in, I said softly. He walked through the gallery slowly, stopping in front of each painting. Finally, he reached the centerpiece, my latest work, a portrait of Grandma Rose in her garden, surrounded by her beloved roses. You captured her perfectly, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Emma, I don't. I held up my hand. If you're here to apologize, save it. 2 years of silence can't be fixed with a simple sorry. I know, he nodded. I don't deserve forgiveness. But your mother, your grandmother, she always said you had her heart. Her ability to see beauty even in broken things. He pulled something from his jacket, a creased, worn piece of paper. I kept this, from when you were 6. It was one of my earliest drawings, a messy crayon sketch of him and me in Grandma's garden. He'd written "My Little Artist" across the top. I was a coward, he continued. I let Diana poison everything good in my life because I was afraid of being alone. But you're so much stronger than I ever was. I looked at the drawing, remembering the father who used to proudly display my art on his office wall, before Diana threw it all away. The fellowship program, I said finally. We need someone to mentor the business students, teaching them how to balance creativity with commerce. The position is yours if you want it, part-time only, and you'll report to the board, not to me. His eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Emma. Don't thank me yet. You'll have to earn back trust, mine and the company's. It won't be easy. I understand. As he walked away, I turned back to Grandma's portrait. The gallery lights caught the gold nameplate beneath it. Rose Bolton, the woman who taught me to paint my own future. Mr. Callahan appeared beside me, smiling. Your grandmother would be proud, not just of the gallery, but of how you've turned the company around. Profits are up 40% since you took over. Because I remembered what she always said, business, like art, is about seeing the full picture. Speaking of which, I handed him a document. The paperwork for the Rose Bolton Arts Foundation. I want to establish scholarships for young artists who need support. Like a certain young woman once did. I smiled, touching my crystal necklace, made from the shards of that vase Diana had thrown, now transformed into something beautiful. Exactly. Sometimes the most broken pieces make the most beautiful art. Later that night, after the guests had left, I sat in Grandma's garden with my sketchbook. The roses she planted were blooming again, their scent filling the air. In the distance, lights glowed warmly in the gallery windows, while my father's office light burned late as he worked on the fellowship program. On my lap lay a new letter, ready to be sealed in a safety deposit box of my own. Dear future artist, it began. Sometimes life's greatest masterpieces take time to reveal themselves. After all, that's what Grandma Rose had taught me. That true legacy isn't just about what we inherit, but what we choose to pass on.